In this video, I'm going to show you how to authorize an ASA round and then create individual ASA agreements. So in most cases, you'll be on the funding round service. So you can go down to ASAs and select ASAs. The first thing you'll do is create approval for ASAs. So this is to allow you to be able to issue ASAs to new investors or existing investors. And you'll start by clicking create approval for ASAs. The platform will automatically set the raise deadline. So when you pay the £1,500 for the ASA product, you have 12 months to be able to issue ASAs. And that's issuing ASA. So you could issue right up until this date here, and that ASA might not actually convert then for another 6 months at the long stop date, but you'd have until the 16th of March 2027 to be able to issue ASAs. As this tip suggests, it's better to overestimate. So I'm going to say, just for this example, that I want to raise £1 million or have the ability to raise £1 million via ASAs over the next 12 months. And in this example, this might be our first time we're taking any investments. There's no existing paperwork. I've not done a funding round before, so I'm just going to leave that at none. If I'm happy with that, I click save, and that will take me to the reviewing part of the process. So we've now defined the terms, which is really as simple as how much do we want to raise, and in this case that there's no existing paperwork, with that raise deadline being 12 months away. I can then refresh and the paperwork's already generated. At this stage, I can have a look at the documents. So I can go and do this in the data room, but I can also just see them all here. So I'd have the board minutes and shareholder resolutions for every shareholder. So founders and in this case, the existing investors. So yeah, I could go in and have a look at this if I want. But I'm going to go back here. I will purchase this. Just give that a refresh again. So now that I've purchased it, I'm actually able to send the invitations. So I'm going to send those to all the shareholders. And immediately I've got the notification here to sign my documents. So I'm the founder, one of the founders. So I've got the option to sign the board minutes and shareholder resolution. So I'm going to go and do that. So you would have a look at these and make sure they're correct. I'm just going to go in, put my password in and sign those. So I've now signed those. We still need the other founder or shareholders to sign the shareholder resolution to get at least 75%. I've covered 37.51%. This consent is investor consent, but we have no existing paperwork. So there's going to be no investor consent that's required. However, if you have already raised, so you've potentially did a full price round with another service provider before coming to Founder Catalyst, you've got a subscription and shareholders agreement, you do have investor consent, then you'd need to tick yes to that, and you can put what those investors are called. Typically it's investor. If I haven't already got authorization, then this makes sure that I'm getting the right authorization. So we are going to request that investor consent letters are signed and the usual board minutes and shareholder resolutions. So I'm going to save that. I'm just going to purchase that. And it's now generating those documents. So I'll just refresh again. So you can see we've got the shareholder resolutions being generated. So if I go to the cap table, you can see we've got 2 founders and 2 investor shareholders, so pre-round and a company shareholder. So let's go back into continue setup, and you can see all the documents. So we've got shareholder resolution and investor consent for the pre-round investor shareholder, board minutes for the founders, shareholder resolutions for the founders, and then again the other shareholder consent and shareholder resolution for the other investor shareholder. So I can check those, make sure they're all correct. I'm happy with that. So I will click send invitations. Now you'll see that there are these 2 signatures waiting for investor consent. So I'll go through, sign the board minutes and shareholder resolution for one of the founders. Then you can see that's been ticked here. So the other founder has signed and the other investor shareholder has signed their consent letter and shareholder resolution. So the shareholder resolution has been passed. So this shareholder just has the investor consent letter. If I show you them signing that, so they sign that, that's everything they need to sign. If we go back to the founder view, everything has now been signed. So that has been authorized. So there's no click to continue. We're now ready to issue ASAs as before. So now we're still on the ASA page. I can go and start issuing ASAs. So you've got some options here where if it was an SPV or nominee, you could go and select the relevant SPV here. Similar, if there was a business, you could put in the business that was investing under an ASA. In my case, I'm just going to put my name as the ASA investor. I will put my email in, do the 16th, today's date. I'm going to say it's a £50,000 ASA. And you'll see again here, this is all about the investor details. So in this case, individual investor, myself and my email. And then this section is about defining the actual ASA agreement. So I'm going to say that Max Heel, this investor's wanting to put in £50,000. At the moment, I've only got ordinary, but you could choose the shareholding class there. Should usually be ordinary. Scheme, I'm going to say I'm an SCIS investor, and qualifying funding round, I'm going to say for this ASA to convert in a funding round, I want that to be 150k funding round. Long stop date of 6 months, which is what the platform puts as the default. And that's because if you want it to be SCIS and ES eligible, it needs to convert within 6 months. And I do have to have a pre-money long stop valuation. So that's the valuation that this ASA converts at if there is no qualifying financing event. So if we don't hit that 150k over the next 6 months, my ASA has to convert at this long stop date, and therefore we have to put in a valuation. So I'm going to put in 1.2 million. Now I can leave the valuation cap and discount. In this example, I'll put something in. So what I'm saying with a discount is, let's say we reach we smash that out the park and we have a 250k funding round. It is at, say, £10 a share, but I'd be offering to these investors a discount on that. So I might give them a 10% discount. I mean, at this point in time, we don't know what that subscription price would be, but let's say it happens to be £10 in the future, they're going to get a 10% discount on that. And therefore, they're going to get more shares than those investors in the price round. And that's because they're coming in early and have additional risk. We could also put in a valuation cap. So I'll put in 3 million for the pre-money valuation cap. And that's the maximum value that this ASA can convert at. And that gives the investor, so the investor might push for this, but it gives the investor some protection against having kind of less shares than they thought they would, and diluting by more than they thought they would. So they might have anticipated a certain percentage of the company, the business massively increased in value by the time the ASA converted, then their £50,000 investment would get them a lot less shares than they expected. So this is saying that the maximum valuation I'm happy for my ASA to convert at is 3 million. But both the pre-money valuation cap and the discount percentage don't need to be added to the ASA. It can just convert at the subscription price in a qualifying round. And then the other part that you have to have is the long stop valuation if it doesn't convert in that funding round. So I'm going to save that investment. And you can see you've got the option to keep issuing more ASAs. And then we've got the kind of active ASA documents here. So if I refresh that, the documents are now ready. I can go and have a look at that. So we could do that now. So this is the ASA. So it's between Max Heel and the company. And here's some of the key things that we were configuring. So the share price will be the lower of a discount of 10% to the subscription price, or to the pre-money valuation cap of 3 million. So whatever's lower would be what the ASA converts at. And if that doesn't happen and there's no qualifying round B here, so there's there's not going to be a qualifying financing event. We go to B, then it takes place at the long stop date. 6 months is what we've put in, and that's at a pre-money long stop valuation of 1.2 million. So we'll see that. We'll see the long stop date 6 months from this agreement, qualifying financing round of 150k. So you could go and make sure you are happy with all of that. I am happy with that. So now I've reviewed my documents. I get the chance to review my documents as the founder before I send them to this investor. I'm happy with that. Or if I wasn't, I could go and edit things or even delete it. But I'm going to send this to Max Heel. So Max Heel will get that email inviting him to set up an account, sign an NDA, sign an FCA disclaimer, and then sign the ASA. So I'll show you this step from the founder. So the founder goes in, we check the ASA, we check it again, we're happy with that, we're going to sign it. And now we're waiting for the investor to sign their part of the process. So once the investors have signed the NDA, FCA disclaimer, and ASA, and the company has also signed the ASA, so when the founders have signed that ASA, the investor will be pushed to send funds to the company. Once you've received this, you can mark as received and simply add your password again. So that marks funds as received for Bunny, and can do the same for the other ASA investor. So their funds have been received. Now, we would be expecting these to convert in a qualifying funding round. Our qualifying funding round is 150k. Otherwise, it's going to convert at the long stop date, which is in 6 months, and that is 16th of September. If you were wanting to convert it early, that's pretty unlikely. Potentially breaks SCIS and EIS if it is an SCIS ASA because you're varying the agreement. So if that is the case, you would raise a support ticket to get support from Founder Catalyst. Typically, this is going to convert in a qualifying round at that subscription price, or potentially with a discount if you put that in, or a pre-money valuation cap if the business is raising at a very high valuation and you've hit that valuation cap, or it's going to convert at the long stop date and the long stop valuation you put into the ASA.